Hi there, welcome to Nonsense Whisky and welcome to 2019. My name is Vin PF and on today's episode we're going into the new year big time hardcore. My usual stuff, I like to cover things that most people can afford, but every now and again I get sent a sample that absolutely has to be explored. This is one of those samples. So this is the XL blend and that's from the Blended Whiskey Company, which if you haven't heard of them is an Atom Brands company, and they also own things like Boutique Whiskey. So if you've heard of those guys, then you kind of know what kind of quality we're dealing with here. So another good reason why I would take a sample of this is because I would never take a sample of something that I wouldn't enjoy. So something like this is absolutely got to be tried. But the XL in this thing, you'd be forgiven for thinking it meant extra large. It doesn't actually mean extra large, even though the pun is kind of playing on that a little bit. But it's XL as in the Roman numerals for 40. So this is a 40-year-old whiskey essentially. It's a blended whiskey, not a blended malt, so we're going to be talking about grains and things like that, and it's presented at a 46.2%. Now before we get any further, we should talk about the price of it all, and that's going to be £550 in the UK. Now at time of recording, this was a couple of weeks after release, so 21st of December was meant to be the release, £550 on Master of Malt, but it now says coming soon, so whether that's already gone, I don't know. So it might actually be too late, unfortunately, because there's only 1,000 bottles of this thing made. But some people might have tried it already because it was in some of the advent calendars sold on Master of Malt. So on the 24th, I think most people got it. That's where all of the kind of craziness online went for it, because you might have heard of this one already. I don't think there's many videos knocking around, but there's been a lot of reviews about it and a lot of people asking where they can get it from and how much it is. Well, there you go, there's that information. Let's get into the nose of it and see if this thing really is any good, shall we? Now, I've let this thing stand on the side for a number of minutes. It's not quite the 40 minutes that I usually say. I usually say a minute for every year in the cask. 40 minutes would be pushing it a little bit, I think, but it's been sat on the side for about 25 minutes. And that, I think, is very, very important with this. Now, as I said, it's a grain, it's not a malt, but I don't get that as my initial kind of thoughts about it. Like, I'm pretty good at telling grains when I smell them, but this one, because I know it's a grain, I'm picking out notes for it, but if I didn't know, I'm pretty sure I would not have a clue. But you're getting a lot of old must on this. It smells aged. It smells sweet. Lots of vanillas. But here's the weird bit. Lots of fruity berries and things like that, you know. Just really nice, really deep. Let's try on the palate. Now, 46.2%. It doesn't taste like that at all. It tastes like it's much higher in ABV. I imagine that they probably wanted to do it at a higher ABV, but it must have blown someone's nostrils off because they brought it down to 46.2, and it's, in my eyes, it's about perfect. Any more, and I think it might start to be quite strong, but it's got a nice spiciness to it. But the really interesting thing about it is the fruitiness, I think. Now, on the nose, I get the fruitiness, but I couldn't really kind of pinpoint anything on it. But on the palate, blackberries just come out of nowhere, which is something I haven't really got from a whiskey before. Maybe the Bamor Vault Edition, I did cover that fairly recently. That's got some weird fruits to it as well. But it's just amazing to get that sort of thing from a whiskey. Yeah, huge fruits. It's a little drying, a little sour as well maybe, which is a bit weird because the nose smelt sweet, and it is kind of sweet on the tongue, but the finish, it all disappears and it dries out and sours out a little bit, but it doesn't take away from the overall flavour at all. I mean, really quite astounding, really quite astounding. I'm very grateful to have to try something like this, really, because here's the crux of it all. At £550, I'm never going to buy a bottle of that. It's far too expensive for me right now where I am. But if you're into your kind of investment whiskies and things like that, something like this that's been talked about quite a lot, I imagine it's going to fly off the shelves, and I imagine it's going to be worth a fair bit of money coming up fairly soon. But for an average drinker like me, if you get a chance to drink it, sure, go ahead, absolutely. You know, it's been in some of these advent calendars, which are relatively cheap these days, about £150, which is obviously expensive for an advent calendar, but if you think you're going to get something like this in it, then it kind of weighs up a little bit. And of course, if you get the opportunity to get a sample of it, then I'm totally on board with that, like I did. But yeah, unfortunately, I can't recommend a purchase of it unless you've got that sort of money sitting around. If £550 does not sound like a lot of money to you at all, I wholeheartedly recommend you run out and get this, but please don't buy it on your credit card, that's all I'll say.